All true beginnings emerge from silence, as if the world pauses before a new word is spoken. Initiation is such a beginning, a rupture of the ordinary, the first spark of the fire that remakes the soul. Initiation, in mythic and ontological terms, renews the human-divine relationship and extends the cosmogony. The same forces that once shaped the world now descend into the microcosm of man. As anthropologist William Stanner wrote of the Aboriginal dream time, one cannot fix the dreaming in time. It was and is every when. It is not a past myth world, but a continuing present. Spirit beings shaped the land and seeded the people, and then withdrew, but remain. Initiation echoes this principle, a recapitulation of creation itself. Ceremonies and rites are patterned after these higher ideals, yet beneath them lies a deeper reality, the direct encounter between humans and supernatural beings, which sparks a decisive inner transformation. The word initiation comes from the Latin in, into, and ire, to go. So to be initiated is to enter into something. The first esoteric initiation is regarded as the entrance into spiritual life, the sacred existence where one becomes directly aware of a greater self and a reality beyond the senses. In part 1 of this series, we traced the first stirrings of this entrance, the knocking of the spirit and its invitation. We saw how restlessness, misfortune, and synchronicity, moved by unseen forces, mark the beginning of the path. But before the journey can truly begin, something profound must occur, reaching into the very core of being itself. In part 2, we cover this stage of preparation, which resolves the crisis of the call, exploring shamanic rites of dismemberment, mystical revelations, cunning folk connecting to their familiars, and the hidden alchemy of transformation revealed in both myth and the transmutation of metals. Throughout these traditions, we trace the image of the secret fire, a burning heat which spurs the awakening of divine energy, signaling both trial and promise of a new dawn. To approach this threshold is to hover at the edge of the unknown. Like all new challenges that change the very course of life, the hardest part is not the ordeal itself, but the leap into it without assurance. To cling to the old seems easier than to surrender control. Many remain here, convincing themselves it's not worth the trouble, but subconsciously haunted by regret and emptiness. True initiation, whether, quote, secular or sacred, demands that moment of release when the soul consents to fall, trusting that unseen hands will catch it. Across cultures, this aid takes the form of a symbolic death and rebirth. All speak to the same paradox. Before reconciling the great unknown, one must first be reduced to nothing and remade. The old life is stripped away and a new foundation is given. This is the mystery of the twice born. If you want to truly live, the question is, how well can you die? Welcome to the Hidden Passage. I know that I hung on a wind-rocked tree 9 whole nights, with a spear wounded, and to Odin offered myself to myself, on that tree of which no one knows from what root it springs. Bread no one gave me, nor horn of drink. Downward I peered, to runes applied myself, wailing, learnt them, then fell down thence. Odin's lay, the Havamal. The initiate is, in essence, a fundamentally changed being. For this new identity to form, the old must be cleared away. The two cannot coexist. Psychiatrist Carl Jung called this false self the persona, quote, that in which reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is. He can never become conscious of himself as he really is without first becoming conscious of his persona. Facing this isn't easy. It requires confronting both the world and dredging the depths of the shadow within. It's tempting to avoid rocking the boat, fearing the loss of order only to face uncertainty and judgment. We do this to ourselves and to others to escape the painful realization of a life unlived, a true self forgotten. This is where the ability to refuse, not the calling, but the influences pulling us off center, becomes the greatest ally, silencing all noise so that the subtle voice of truth can be heard. Philosopher René Descartes compared the mind to a basket of apples. If some are rotten, the only way to save the rest is to empty the whole basket, examine each one, and return only those that are sound. So too with belief, the philosopher must cast everything out at once as if all were false, and only readopt what proves indubitable. As esoteric philosopher Rudolf Steiner explains, quote, the initiate must detach himself from all supports he has relied on hitherto. In a sense, he must become homeless in order to find a new home in the spirit. This principle lies at the heart of what might be called self-initiation, the agency we always retain despite circumstance, despite how impossible it may feel to extract ourselves from the tangled webs we weave. Mythologist Joseph Campbell reminds us, quote, not all who hesitate are lost. The psyche has many secrets in reserve, and these are not disclosed unless required. This cannot be described as an answer to any specific call. Rather, it is a deliberate, terrific refusal to respond to anything but the deepest, highest answer to the as yet unknown demand of some waiting void within, a kind of total strike or rejection of the offered terms of life, as a result of which some power of transformation carries the problem to a plane of new magnitudes, where it is suddenly and finally resolved.
How do you know that you're on your path? Because it disappears. That's how you know. How do you know that you're really doing something radical? Because you can't see where you're going. That's how you know. But everything you have lent on for your identity has gone. And so you are going to enter the black contemplative splendors of self-doubt. You know, we often feel we're not going to go into these areas of the psyche because it's all wet and woolly in there, and besides you need to hold the hand of a trained psychologist. But actually poetry shows how incredibly precise it is in there, and that there's an equally clear bottom line, but the rules are very different. And the rules are much more movable, and the whole world is much more dynamic. And this is what the elder is telling to this young boy or girl who asks the question, what do I do when I'm lost in the forest? The elder says, stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. You cannot sleepwalk your way into your destiny. You must wake up and pay attention. That means paying attention to the shadows of your existence too. You must pay attention to everything you've given away in order to make yourself safe.
Across traditions, this deliberate inwardness was embodied in long periods of isolation. Christian hermits sought the desert as a furnace of transformation. Hebrew prophets and shamanic initiates alike retreated to the wilderness for fasting and prayer until a spirit contact was made. The Book of Abramelin, a 15th century grimoire that laid much of the groundwork for self-initiation in Western occultism, codified this principle in ritual form. The aspirant was instructed to withdraw for 6 months, keeping silence and strict purification rites until the holy guardian angel appeared. The quote, true friend and comforter, bearer of divine knowledge. The angel is not compelled. It descends when the vessel has been emptied enough to receive it.
Unless you have silence, an ability for silence in your body to do that, then you will get too frightened, because all the voices inside you will drown out any real change. But profound silence is being called on here. And then that attention can flower into something else.
Supernatural aid does not rush to fill the noise of ordinary life. It comes only after withdrawal, the necessary prelude to revelation. Whether forced by fate or chosen by discipline, only when the anchors of desire and attention are released and space is made can the light enter. This affords the practitioner an unbroken focus and heightened senses required to perceive not only his own inner depth, but the depth of the world around him. As occultist Henrik Cornelius Agrippa noted of invocatory techniques, they are marked by a, quote, singleness of wit, innocency of mind, a firm credulity, and constant silence. Wherefore spirits do often meet with children, women, and poor and mean men. One Scottish observer noted of the local seers, quote, that they neither see nor think of anything else except the vision as long as it continues. And a 16th century English clergyman recounted how a, quote, teacher of the unhallowed arts would focus long and intently on the falling of a fern seed, a token of the fairy king, to see what he could see and hear from it. The lesson in proper frame of mind is best summarized by Yaqui sorcerer Don Juan, quote, if you really want to learn, you have to remodel most of your behavior. You take yourself too seriously. You are too damn important in your own mind so that you feel justified to be annoyed with everything, to leave if things don't go your way. I suppose you think that shows you have character. Nonsense. You're weak and conceited. In the course of your life, you have never finished anything because of that sense of disproportionate importance that you attach to yourself. The world around us is very mysterious. It doesn't yield its secrets easily. Now we are concerned with losing self-importance. As long as you feel that you are the most important thing in the world, you cannot really appreciate the world around you. You are like a horse with blinders, and all you see is yourself apart from everything else. Here we are reminded of the need for humility. Recognizing our limits and small part to play opens the door to mutuality and ultimately gnosis. The old psychic regime can become a kind of pollution that suffocates new growth. Like the caterpillar whose immune system attacks the imaginal cells of the butterfly, the ego instinctively resists transformation, poisoning and attacking the very forms of change. A clean slate must be prepared. Though we may tend to frame this in psychoanalytic self-help terms, the guiding voices, disaffected aspects of the self, the anima or the animus, most spiritual traditions affirm that true change requires the help of a supernatural force. As Steiner said, quote, the human being does not reach initiation by himself alone, but only in cooperation with higher beings. Traditions dramatize the rebirth process of initiation as ritual dismemberment. Historian of religions Mircea Eliade states, quote, The future shaman sometimes sees himself reduced to a skeleton. The flesh is removed from his bones and his organs are taken out. The bones are then covered again with flesh. This symbolic death signifies the end of his profane life and the beginning of a new one, that of a shaman. Among the Yakut, it is believed that each shaman has a benefactor in the form of a giant eagle with an iron beak, claws like meat hooks, and the tail of a beast. This figure, recognized as the shaman's spirit mother, oversees this second birth. She carries the initiate's soul to the underworld and places it on the branch of a great pine. When the soul has ripened, she tears the body to pieces and feeds it to the spirits of disease and death. To be consumed by them is to gain power over them, for it is not the true self that is threatened, but the ego. As Campbell observed, if one is one's own god, then God becomes the devil. The possibility that everything we've dedicated our lives to, our identity itself, could be irredeemably flawed is a real dragon. Sometimes the whole castle must come down because it was built on a foundation of sand. When we cling to pride and defend this artifice, the world is filled with demons because they devour weakness and falsehood, and we ourselves become food. For the shaman, however, in a twist of ingenuity and reversal, like maggots placed upon a wound, destruction becomes the very means of healing and renewal. After this dismantling and ripening of the soul, the bird mother regrows a new body for the initiate. He awakens from a deep slumber, reborn. The process, though grisly, is not punishment but grace. Spirits intervene to do what the candidate cannot in his limited condition: break down the form warped by old function, ossified by ignorance and repetition. The spirits act as physician artificers, healing the initiate and crafting a vessel capable of housing his newly expanded nature so that he can fully re-enter the world. Strikingly, across accounts, this dismemberment is usually described as painless. The true agony was in the false life and the resistance leading up to it. We find echoes of this ritual destruction even in Christian mysticism. Saint Teresa of Avila, one of the great Spanish mystics of the 16th century, describes her experience of the, quote, wound of divine love, or transverberation. Quote, I saw an angel very close to me on my left side. He was not large, but small of stature. I saw in his hands a large golden dart, and it seemed he had taken it from the fire. He plunged it into my heart several times so that it penetrated my very entrails. When he pulled it out, I felt he was carrying them away with him, and I was left wholly inflamed with a great love for God. The records of the Cunning folk and witches preserve a humbler echo of this theme. Many witches testified to nursing their familiars with blood, and it was often described as an intimate, pleasurable experience, which may hint at deeper ecstatic joy. The Suffolk Cunning man John Bysack recalled that he would sometimes make a fire and lay by it, whereby spirits in the form of snails clung to him and sucked his blood, excusing himself to his wife by saying that it eased him from the pain which troubled him. We may read the misfortunes and hardships endured in the Cunning folk and witch accounts as a form of dismemberment of life itself, a threshold experience that ushered the practitioner into a new modality of being. What happens to the body in shamanic dismemberment happens to the cosmos in myth. Out of the chaos, the world is created. As occultist Alice Bailey notes, it is not just human beings who undergo initiations. Just as the old self is stripped to the bone, So too, the world itself is believed to periodically return to a pre-formal state before being molded again. Every mythological age ends in destruction before a new reformation. In nature, the biosphere collapses before a new order of life arises. Many such parallels are to be found in nature. As anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss reminds us, quote, "Myth is not simply a story told for its own sake. It is a logical model capable of overcoming contradiction. Science and myth are two parallel modes of knowledge." Out of the mists of time comes down to us the corpus hermeticum, attributed to the quasi-historical figure Hermes Trismegistus, often regarded by esotericists as the godfather of the Western mystery traditions. Hermes himself was initiated with a seminal vision, contained in the text that would echo through the ages. Here, initiation mirrors creation itself in all its sublime glory, terrible and beautiful at once. Hermes, like all initiates, is made aware of the sacred order of reality as part of his initiation, the outer reflecting the inner, the greater in the lesser. He recounts that the experience began, quote, "as my thinking soared high, and my bodily senses were restrained, like someone heavy with sleep. At length, a great, quote, completely unbounded being appeared to him, who called itself the mind of sovereignty, poimandres. Expressing his desire to learn, the being directed him to keep in mind what he wished to know, and its form began to change. Quote, in an instant, everything was immediately opened to me. I saw an endless vision in which everything became light, clear, and joyful, and in seeing the vision, I came to love it. Then darkness arose and descended, fearful and gloomy, coiling sinuously so that it looked to me like a snake. It became of a watery nature, indescribably agitated and smoking like a fire. It produced an unspeakable wailing. Then an inarticulate cry like the voice of fire came forth from it. But from the light, a holy word mounted upon the water. Untempered fire leapt up from it, nimble, piercing, and active, and because air was light, it followed after spirit. Creation itself emerges from the crisis of the groaning deep. In the same way, the initiate is plunged into the abyss so that a new creation may emerge within him, and fire is set up as the first child of striving, the force that separates, purifies, and drives the great ascent. O living flame of love, that tenderly wounds my soul, in its deepest center, tear through the veil of this sweet encounter. St. John of the Cross. Time and time again, creation and initiatory ecstasies are linked to heat and fire. The shamanic crisis is often expressed as symptoms of burning. In Hindu tradition, Prajapati, the creator god and lord of creatures, brings forth creation through heat and sweat. Tantric texts describe Kundalini as a flame, while miracle workers were once called boiling. This is the magical heat that awakens the dormant power within the initiate, the raw force of creation, once latent, now activated by the secret word. The serpent uncoils and ascends. One of the most dramatic examples of this is found in the ancient Germanic warrior cults, from which came the fearsome berserkers. The Ynglinga saga tells us that they, quote, went without shields and were mad as wolves, and neither fire nor steel would deal with them. To achieve this superhuman condition, the initiate entered a state of frenzy, having been trained in magico-religious rites to summon a mysterious force from the depths of his being. In sagas like that of Cunning, the frenzy is marked by a feverish heating of the skin. In myth and initiation alike, what threatens to consume is also what creates and transforms. To stand in the fire is to risk annihilation, but also to awaken. The Irish saga of Cunning serves to warn of the dangers of such a fire mishandled. The Riastrad frenzy twisted the young hero's body into monstrous shapes. Invoking a force greater than oneself requires preparation and guidance, as the wise women warned that if left unchecked, he might kill every man in Ulster, friend and foe alike. Bailey repeatedly speaks of the role of mysterious masters who sponsor the candidate and oversee their spiritual progression. She describes the first initiation as a carefully orchestrated ceremony of fire. Quote, "The candidate is surrounded by those who have gone before. The initiator applies the rod of power, and the fire of the higher worlds is transmitted into him. All the initiate can see is a great wall of flame. This would be destructive if it were not for the protective triangle of force formed by two masters who stand before him. Thus, the new life is safeguarded into being. What could destroy instead transforms, because the guides bear the voltage of the sacred. Real burns through the unreal, and the new self, the microcosm, is sealed." "Understand the light, then, and recognize it," said Poimandres to Hermes, who stared at him until he began to tremble. Quote, "But when he raised his head, I saw in my mind the light of powers beyond number, and a boundless cosmos had come to be. The fire, encompassed by a great power and subdued, kept its place fixed. The same flame of the initiate burns in the luminaries that, quote, encompass the sensible world in circles, and whose government is called fate. Fire, beginnings, and destiny are woven together." We can talk about abstract spiritual ideas and psychoanalytic parallels of initiation, but it's also considered to be a science that encompasses soul, body, and mind, not just a moral, philosophical issue, but a metaphysical imperative. To better understand this, we may look to the mysteries of alchemy to expand our concept of initiation. Esoteric thinkers saw the initiatory process reflected in the alchemical arts. It was often understood as more than just a physical science. Alchemists carried the tenet that within everything is the seed of everything, the monad which gives rise to all things. This they termed Azoth, the universal Mercury. Several of the most renowned adepts believed that their craft was as much spiritual as physical. As esoteric writer Manly P. Hall warned, if an alchemist labors for gold alone, though he spends his life and fortune in chemical experimentation, he will not produce the desired end. This was not mere moralizing. It was recognition that without inner transformation, outer results remain sterile. No real chemical transmutation could be accomplished without subtle transformations within both matter and the one who handled it. Physician alchemist Paracelsus insisted, quote, "The true alchemist has the magnesia in himself, attracting the virtues of the heavens and the elements." Alchemist George von Wellig noted, quote, "There is no true solution of the body without a coagulation of the spirit. When the body is dissolved and the spirit coagulated, then the two are joined in one essence. The bodily essence becomes of a spiritual, penetrating nature. It shines like the sun and illuminates the hidden parts of nature. By the fire and the art of separation, the corruptible is made incorruptible, and the mortal is clothed with immortality. Here we come to the audacity of alchemy, the belief that the slow, patient work of nature, by which every stone was destined to one day become gold, could be catalyzed. As psychologists Alan Colmes and Stanley Krippner observe, quote, evolution is not simply change, but the emergence of higher orders of complexity. It is a movement towards greater self-organization, and consciousness evolves along with it. It was believed that this gradual evolution could be accelerated by human art, whereby one could leap into this higher order, a conscious participation in what nature accomplishes unconsciously. To intervene was to trespass upon a sacred process, and so it demanded purity of heart, cooperation with, not transgression against nature. As one text puts it, quote, nature and art ought to lovingly embrace, for if art separates itself from nature, it becomes a monster. If, as we discussed in part 1, life itself is naturally initiatory, then the mysteries are its quickening. Alchemy was a kindred spirit to theurgy, the sacred art of consciously elevating the individual into a divine condition. The most essential driver used to achieve transmutation was heat. Through its sustained application, the underlying universal essence could be activated and separated from the dross, or the gross physical material. This purification, known as calcination, was the first necessary operation that had to be completed before any other alchemical process could take place. But even fire cannot complete the work. After calcination, the new form must settle. This carefully guided process was called solve et coagula. Alchemist Basil Valentine explained that the philosopher's stone must be, quote, cherished as a mother cherishes her child, warming it with gentle heat and cooling so that it may set. Cuchulain's fury had to be cooled in vats of water, prepared by cunning women, each of which boiled at his touch until the third finally cured him. For initiates, after the fever comes a cooling in the form of forgetfulness. What the flames purify, the cool stillness hardens into form, ensuring the new self is sealed away. In many traditions, the initiate not only loses his old supports, but also his memory of them. Among the Liberian Poro, novices forgot their very names and even how to perform the simplest tasks. Only through gradual instruction were they taught again to speak, eat, and live in the new order. Steiner likened this phenomenon to drinking a draught of forgetfulness. This is absolutely necessary for the initiate, he explains, for he must possess full faith in the immediate present without being continually disturbed by the lower memory. He must be able to destroy that veil of memory which extends itself round humanity more and more thickly with every moment. The ancients encoded this truth in myth. In Greece, souls drank from Lethe before rebirth, erasing the memory of their former lives. In Norse vision, Mimir's well of wisdom demanded forgetfulness as its price. Each echoes the same principle. Psychic attachments to the past must be effaced, for memory can bind as surely as flesh. To drink in oblivion is to erase one's personal history, to be rendered blank so that the true script may be written according to the secret knowledge. What did or did not happen before what was projected into the future no longer has a claim on the initiate, who has now passed into sacred time. Ruminating on dramatic ceremonies and complex alchemical formulae, it's easy to forget the more subtle manifestations of initiatory logic. We've seen how transformation invokes the hidden power of the self through a kind of dance between surrender, intent, and what Campbell calls supernatural aid. He writes, quote, "For those who have not refused the call, the first encounter of the hero journey is with a protective figure, often a little old crone or old man, who provides the adventurer with amulets against the dragon forces he is about to pass. What such a figure represents is the benign, protecting power of destiny, a reassurance and promise that the peace of paradise, which was known first within the mother's womb, is not to be lost, that it supports the present and stands in the future as well, that though omnipotence may seem to be endangered by threshold passages and life awakenings, protective power is always and ever present within the sanctuary of the heart, the immanent within, or just behind the unfamiliar features of the world." Just as we see this motif in folktales and myth, we also find precedent in reality among cunning folk and witch testimonies. Cunning man John Webster claimed to have traveled into a fairy hill where the queen gave him a white powder with which he was able to heal the sick. Such accounts were frequent enough that King James himself, in his book Demonology, wrote that, quote, "Sundry witches have gone to death with the confession that they have been transported with the fairy to such a hill, which opening they went in, and there saw a fair queen, who being now lighter, gave them a stone which had sundry virtues." These stories remind us that aid was not reserved for mystics alone. It filtered into the daily lives of common folk, whose practices preserved in miniature the same principle of divine intervention. As Paracelsus maintained, quote, "Everyone may educate and regulate his imagination so as to come thereby into contact with spirits and be taught by them." Then I began to bear fruit and to know many things, to grow well and thrive. The cosmic and the personal, the mythic and the domestic, all converge in the mystery of the twice born. Initiation begins with crisis and ends with aid. What seems like destruction is renewal. What feels like death is birth. What seems like a tomb is really a womb. The temporary return to the fertile, preformal state. Opposites are reconciled through the obstetric power of the Great Mother. Chaos breeds creation. Like the first dawn breaking after night, or the green shoot piercing up through the earth, a new order of life rises from the fragments of the old. The link to the guiding forces is renewed, and thus begins a co-authorship with higher principles, designs of purpose and meaning incommensurable to the old way of being. Perhaps the most awe-inspiring implication of initiation is that it seems to mark the true beginning of life. Eliade asserted that, quote, "This new life is conceived as the true human existence. It is through initiation that men attain the status of human beings. Before initiation, they do not yet fully share in the human condition." One Alaskan shaman's lament perhaps mirrors the state of the world today, in which this art has been lost. Quote, "The Angakuks now are all priests or doctors, weather prophets, conjurers, or clever merchants selling their skill for pay. but the ancients devoted their lives to maintaining the balance of the universe, to great things, immense, unfathomable things. To be initiated is to cross that invisible threshold where existence ceases to feel accidental. Physicist Wolfgang Pauli described it this way: "It is as though one were entering a cosmic clockwork in which each part has its own place and function, even when unseen. One wakes as though for the first time and realizes that this old world is a new world, is a bold world. Life before was just a rehearsal. Life after is the performance." Cunning man John McGregor stated that he would not advise any ordinary man to learn the second sight because he would not be left alone a minute in his life, but he would see innumerable men and women night and day round about him, which perhaps he would think wearisome and unpleasant. But for the initiate, it is fulfillment, a life lived in full consciousness with all the ecstasy and awe that comes with it. He understands now his true nature, his relation to the cosmos, that he is part of a great scheme that links to all beginnings and ends, that he is both divine and finite, standing before the immensity of it all. And as if to soothe the quailing of a soul lost in its own depth, a Canadian Igloolik shaman recalls his own invocatory chant, repeated until he burst into tears, trembling, overwhelmed by a great dread. Mounting the waters, the words ring out, "Joy, joy, joy! I see a little shore spirit, a little awa. I myself am also an awa, the shore spirit's namesake. Joy, joy!"